Hey, welcome to another edition of Down the Road. Nicole Flick is going to join us today. What would it be like to have a day without childcare? They're trying to make a point. They're trying to show you how important childcare is. We'll talk to her about that. Kyle Ozond is going to join us. He's Cass County NDSU Extension. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening with the crop situation out there. We're so wet, so I don't know anybody better to begin with than Daryl Ritchison, a man that we count on a lot here down the road. He is director of North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network, something he has been working on for a long time and built one heck of a network. Daryl, good to have you back coming down the road with us.
I wished I could be on and talk about how warm and sunny and how well the crops are doing, but it's always bad weather.
The truth is, I'm not sure we'd call you that.
No.
Because we'd say Daryl did his job. Who did you tick off? I mean, the big guy upstairs mad at you, or is he mad at me, or who?
I think would the audience agree if I picked on you? And
I think right now they're going, well, that one's easy. It's definitely you.
I didn't want to say it, but
so the pattern, when you look at the pattern this week, and there are so many people watching. I spoke on my radio show to some folks from the Williston Basin. They're still dry. They take moisture, but the truth be told, here in the east, we're flooding. Today in Fargo, there were people caught underneath underpasses, and on 32nd Avenue, water was going inside the door on some cars. I mean, it's wet here, Daryl.
Yeah, it rained really hard and quick, and we're flat, and we got that street flooding this morning. We transitioned around the 1st of April to southwest flow, and southwest flow means that the upper level wind, say the jet stream, is now coming in out of the southwest. When storms form in a southwest flow, they will take their time going from, say, Colorado or New Mexico or Arizona, and as they track up, they can, because they're areas of low pressure, which are, just think of them as vacuum cleaners, things are sucking in and then rising with areas of low pressure, that we're able to draw in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. That's where we get our flow. It's by far our wettest flow that we have. Most of last year, and even all over the winter, outside of a few weeks in December, we were in northwest flow. And storms just don't have enough time to pick up moisture with northwest flow. So we had a lot of wind this winter, but not a lot of moisture. And so now we've been stuck in southwest flow for about 5 weeks, and I see at least another 7 or 10 days of this. Really, we have to go through the rest of this week, maybe into early next week. I do believe, and I can kind of start seeing the northern hemisphere transitioning, and I think we'll get into northwest flow towards the end of the month. The problem is, if you're not too wet, you can dry out in 4 or 5 days. If you're flooded, you're probably stuck with prevent plant this year. It's just really frustrating to see it just week after week, this time of year in particular.
You are right, though. It can dry out fast. With as wet as what we were, the days kind of come together. But a week ago, and then we had those high winds, when it was sunny. And next thing I knew, I was seeing some people scratching around out there. One of the individuals from the Tyler area, I spoke to him at an event on Saturday night. Yep, it was Saturday night. And he told me, he said, I'm kind of making a mess, but I just felt like getting out in the field. He said it's dry enough to not get stuck, but not good enough to seed.
Correct. And truth be, if it was not for these couple of waves, we had one Sunday morning, we're having one today here on Monday, people would be planting today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. But no, we got, 2 more waves of moisture coming through. And then we have another pretty substantial wave, the way it looks on Thursday. And it'll probably be from Wednesday night through Friday morning. But it'll be another big wave. So then we're going to have to wait a minimum of, I think, 5 days after that. Here's the positive, Joel. We have had this tendency this century, really for the last 20 years, and yes, you can find exceptions, but we've had bad springs, good falls. And if we can get that 5 days, and if we can get things planted by May 20th through the 25th, close to Memorial Day, that would still give us about 125 day growing season if we just get our average first frost, which is the very end of September. So there's still time. All indications to me are a drier than average summer. We can live off of this moisture. A drier than average summer would mean more sunshine, more growing degree day units, more photosynthesis. There still can be a good crop going forward if we can just get 5 or 6 days in a row without rain and get things planted. And that, of course, is the big problem right now.
You were in weather as a young man. Not that you're old now. You're younger than me, so I don't want to call you old. But you were in weather on TV as a young man. It used to be the old adage that April was, a wetter month than May. By May, you're in the field. The old April showers bring May flowers kind of was that ever true? Was it ever, you always have a historic background from that many years of being a professional in the weather. I mean, was it ever true?
No, because May is almost everywhere the second wettest month of the year. June's number 1, May is number 2, then July is number 3, August is number 4, April is number 5. Usually, April traditionally is a drier month, and truth be told, in the last 25 years, the trend for Aprils have been colder and drier, not wetter. This year was a big anomaly, not so much on the coldness, but definitely on the wetness. It was one of the wettest months, Aprils we've ever had, depending on your location. Most areas at least finished in the top 5. So it was a big anomaly. When I was out speaking this fall farmers about the growing season, I said I really think what's going to happen in the spring is we'll get a 4 or 5 week period with southwest flow. So if we have problems in the spring, it's going to be wetness, not dryness. Did I think we're going to have one of the wettest Aprils on record? Of course not. No one's that good. I wished I was that good to give people the heads up. But I really thought then that once we got into mid-May, we'll get back into the northwest flow and things would go back to the way things have been. And it still looks like that scenario looks true. It's just a matter of how much rain did a given area got. We still have thousands of acres that are flooded. That are just probably not going to get planted this year. But I'm speaking to the other folks that I still think there's time this year, like I mentioned, to get a good growing season ahead of us.
Well, in the case of a lot of farmers out there, the varieties matter. Mm-hmm. Whether or not I'm raising 100-day corn or raising 110-day corn, which coincides, of course, with yield. But is there any way to predict whether or not we have a later frost? Can you see in your crystal ball and see something like that?
The thing is, the truth be, you can't. Because take this for an example. Last year, we had one of the warmest Mays that we've ever had. Last year, a year ago. We had that devastating very last freeze on May, what was it, 28th, 29th last year.
That. Yeah.
Just devastating in a very warm month. If you want to play with like my analog package, the way I do my forecasting, I think the odds are really good that we'll get into the end of September and have an average or a later than average first freeze this fall. But it only takes one day. And we had that occur to us. Actually, it was more than one day. We had a couple of cold days back in September of 2020, very early, the 8th and 9th of September. And that's always the problem with these types of scenarios. It only takes one morning. You can have the warmest September on record, but you had that one cold morning. This growing season's done. All I can say is that if you look at the past 20 years, outside of 2020, the trend has been for cold springs, warmer falls. And the way that the pattern is going, I do believe that we can get through the end of September. And let's be honest, farming's always playing the odds.
Yeah.
And, in some ways. And to be honest, to play safe, I'd plant the shortest variety I could this year to be on the safe side because we're going so late. But there's still, like I said, opportunity for 120 to 130-day growing season this year if, again, we can get planted between the 20th and 25th of May, which is a big question mark in a lot of areas.
You keep track, you keep records. You look at it, from an analog standpoint, but it's still man that made the calendar. That man decided that this was going to be May rather than May was going to be middle of June type
Correct.
of a thing.
No, absolutely.
I mean, at times, it was maybe it was from a movie, but the Native American question of when was I born? Well, you were born in the spring. I mean, the calendar was determined by us, and other cultures didn't care whether it was May 15th or May 7th or whatever day. Pick a day.
No, well, and I get accused of, and I always am the first one to admit this, I am a glass half full person. It's just my personality. And sometimes, well, Daryl, you're always all optimistic. And I go, I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, I'm still looking at things, to me, statistically, factually, that if we can get out during this time frame, Yeah, and with our average frost date nearly the very last day of the month, it's between the 25th and 30th September, there still is that window in there, no matter how you want to play with the seasons going forward. And if we have, even 1 degree above average summer, not as warm as last summer, we still, that growing degree day units, just getting things in place. I'm just saying that there are definitely opportunities out there, and I wouldn't just throw the season away. Commodity prices are excellent if you can get out there. And plus, after that devastating frost we had last year, especially soybeans had to get replanted. Those soybeans, and for most folks, did better than the early ones because then they missed that heat wave we had in early June last year. So yeah, that was a lower planting scenario soybean, a very short cultivar. But, there was still people planted in June last year and still got, a healthy profit out of it. Not as good as they wanted, but pretty good. But I just want to throw that out there because I know there's so many people in ag right now just really depressed. This is really bad. I'm just saying, I understand. But again, there's these opportunities still out there. Just don't throw the whole season away quite yet.
So is it me or is it coming, I don't want to say all at once, but when you start getting, where I live today, we're already up to 2.5 inches. That's significant.
Yes.
That's significant, and it came all in the course of probably 3 hours. Is that the norm for a May?
We average about, in your part of the world, nearly 3 inches this month. Other areas are closer to 2. Where you're at, the wettest spot in the state of North Dakota, because you're in the southeast corner. Here's the thing, we tend to get it always in chunks. You have this average, and how many times through the years have you gotten 80% of your monthly precipitation with one thunderstorm? Historically, we live and die by thunderstorms here. They're very hit and miss in the summertime, and you get the right one, that plot gets 250 acre bushel corn. Your buddy 2 miles down the road missed that one good thunderstorm and ended up with 160 type scenario. So to get it very quickly is very common. We live in the land of extremes in North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, and the northern plains here. It's just the reality of our climate type. And so I wouldn't say it's unusual. It's just that we're going to get more than that, sadly, that 2.5 inches, because we have a couple of other waves coming this week, let alone, we're still going to get rain very likely at the end of the month.
Do you believe in global warming? Are we in different patterns? Where are we at with all this?
Well, the world's warmer than it was 120 years ago. In that sense, that to me, it's very hard deniable. Is it altering and making our weather patterns crazier? I personally don't see any difference than what we've seen in the past. I always remind people, Devil's Lake has gone dry in the last 1,200 years. It has also overflowed into the Cheyenne naturally in the last 1,200 years. So you can't blame everything that you see. We've had wetter Aprils in some areas than we had last year. We've had colder. Everything gets blamed on that. A lot of times it is truly just the weather. We think of weather in terms of sometimes 2 or 3 week patterns. I think the globe thinks of weather in 1,000 or 10,000 year patterns. Yeah. And so you always have to remember that. I have never seen anything happen currently that I cannot find an example of it happening in the past. So if it happened in the past, what causes it? I always remind people that in weather, X does not equal Y. One thing does not cause another. It's more complicated than that. So yeah, I think humans have some impact on the climate. Are we the only controlling factor that some people, I think, lean towards? Absolutely not. That's just way carrying it overboard going forward. I'm not a catastrophic climate change person. Other people are and think the end of the world's coming in 50 years, but some of these people have been saying that for 50 years also. So yeah, I try to take a very more common sense approach to that. I know there's people that disagree with me, and I have a high degree of respect for those who disagree with me. And there's people that just get really angry with me sometimes about saying what I just did, but that's fine too.
Well, it's, you base your decisions on the history, the science, everything that goes along with it, which is one of the reasons that I asked you. Nobody's going to ask me. I get that. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a weatherman. But, the one thing that you acknowledge is the fact that the planet's getting warmer, right? Or not getting warmer, is warmer, is probably a better way of putting it. And so, people are bound to talk about the cause of that.
Oh, well, no doubt. But at the same time, I know this will probably anger somebody out there listening, but far as I know, the world could be getting cooler in the next 50 years, and I can show you research where people think that. I don't necessarily agree with that either, but I just am saying that, it's a very complicated system, and we do not understand the Earth atmospheric system as well as you might believe.
I think a lot of it, Daryl, comes into the fact that you have these extremes. You have this extreme 2-day blizzard, and you forget that if you go back to the winter of 1966, they had 2-day, 3-day blizzards. But you miss that generationally. And then you have a month like May, like it's been, where it's so wet that people aren't out in the field when normally they've been out in the field in April. And sometimes these farmers have been out in the field in March. And so now they're living through a year when everybody's going, what's going on? What's going on in our weather out there?
And at the same token, when I did my winter talks this winter, I said if we're going to have problems this spring, it's going to be wetness, not dryness, and then we'll change. How did I even have that inclination of knowing that? It's studying the past, understanding weather patterns. It doesn't mean that they're any different, because this has happened to us before under these same scenarios. After the winter of, what was the worst winter before we had the mid-90s that we've had in Red River Valley was probably back in the winter of 1936, 1937. Well, that occurred right after the horrid dryness that we had in 1936 and saw temperatures that we haven't even come close to seeing since. And we're not too far in the distant future, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of that scenario. When I look at weather, I look at the last 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years. A lot of people only look at the past 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So
that was my point. My point was we remember that one extreme. We remember that, and then we forget it a year later.
Oh, very, very, very much so. I reminded people about, this April's just been terrible. And I said, 2018, just 4 years ago, was even colder than this April. And they go, no, and I go, and guess what? In 2026, I doubt you'll remember how cold this April was, as an example. And so I do look at things different perspective. And I also understand most people don't have the history behind it as much. I'm just a huge weather geek. And there's just no denying it. So
I like that about you.
It's my, so I understand that I do look at things different than a lot of other people. But I've loved weather since I was 5 years old. I've been doing this as a profession for 35 years, and so I just do a lot of research and studying more so than others. And again, I always respect when people disagree with me.
See, I can take all of this. I just hate the wind. On Saturday, where I was, the wind was over 50 miles an hour, and I just wanted to work outside, and it was a nice day. I mean, it was, and I just wanted to get some work done around the yard. It was, the wind plays me out. Maybe it's my age, maybe it's whatever, but it made me want to just have a beer way earlier in the day than what I should. Yeah.
Well, I had I kid with my family that I go, I see the wind gods. Little G, they destroyed something that I had been working on for a month on Saturday. So I know what you're talking about. That's all I'm saying, Joel.
And we've talked about this on air before, but there's always new people watching. I want them to know about this. The North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network. Tell people what that is. Tell people what you are the director of.
We run, right now we have 172 weather stations in Montana, Minnesota, and most of which are in North Dakota, and so are named the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network. We run a lot of tools and guidance in agriculture. We can help forecast when crop diseases are going to occur. As an example, we do some basic stuff, growing degree day units, heat units, so you can begin to calculate potentially what your yields are going to be if our average frost is at, say, when it normally occurs. We also, for example, this morning, there was a heavy rain event in eastern Eddy County. The National Weather Service in Grand Forks issued a flash flood warning for that because we had a sensor there that had 3 inches of rain. And it was probably in the middle of the night, their only sensor that was available. So we do work with the National Weather Service, can use our tools. Emergency management uses our tools, for example. Plus, we have soil moisture indicators out throughout the state where the frost depth is. We're working with the oil industry to help monitor the gravel roads in western North Dakota, so when we know when we should and shouldn't be driving on those with big trucks. We work with a lot of other counties in that capacity too. So when you live in an area where weather is such a dominant feature of our lives here, having all this valuable weather information, I think, is just very, very crucial. And there's, to me, a very big return on investment in that. And NDAWN, for the most part, is a public-private enterprise. Public is my salaries, but most of our weather stations are financed privately by individuals or, say, agribusinesses and such, or just a group of farmers sometimes. I do have some grant money and some other things that I'm working on as well, but historically, it's been that public-private partnership where we all come together and bring the information that we need. That becomes very valuable in the sense we don't like the weather lately, but NDAWN has been used in so many ways in this past month just to help people out and understand where certain things are occurring within the state.
Can people get that data? Can they go someplace and find out what each one of those sources say?
If you go to just type in your favorite search engine, NDAWN, N-D-A-W-N, you will find websites for it. Our easiest website for most people to remember would be NDAWN, N-D-A-W-N.info. So it's .info. Most people are used to typing in .com, but just NDAWN.info. It will link to our main website, but that also, that site has a lot of information, crop tools, growing degree day units. There's some tools on there for sugar beet growers on there, all the current weather. You can see how much it's rained, for instance, recently at all of our sites, because that map, just gets filled up. We have 172 points of getting rainfall totals, which of course has been very valuable for the most part, in a negative way for most folks in the last 6 weeks.
Daryl, you've been great to Beck News. Thank you.